It is a little after 8:30, challenging morning for travel, but we now have a quorum, so we'll go ahead and call to order the meeting of the Legislative and Human Resources Committee of the Board of Commissioners. First item of business is public comment. If anyone has a comment to the committee, you may do so. Please approach the podium, identify yourself by name, and you have up to 3 minutes. And I don't see anyone from the public, so we'll move right on to item number 2, which is approval of the minutes from November 26. It's been moved and supported. Any discussion? Not all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It is approved. We'll move to item number 3. Public Affairs Associates. Becky Beckler is here. Thought she was one step away from no quorum and going home, but
so close. And I actually have a positive report today.
Yes, good news out of Lansing.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to be here today. We are in the last week of legislative session for the year. Both the House and the Senate plan to work Tuesday and Wednesday. That would be today and tomorrow, which may bleed into Thursday morning. But then they will adjourn for the rest of the year. Since it is the season of giving, the legislature and the governor have decided that they're going to give about $573 million in supplementals before they leave. They'll be divided into 2 supplementals. One is a school aid bill, and then the other is a regular supplemental that have actually already started to move through the process. Last week, both chambers moved identical bills, so all the bills are in place and ready for final action this week. I would like to run through just a few of those items specific to the county. That is good news. Most of our priorities were reestablished in this, and this first supplemental is really the issues that are emergent, those that they felt like they needed to address sooner versus later. And this agreement does open the door for them to come back in mid-January and then address those other items that are not included in this supplemental. So the West Michigan Partnership for Children was restored at $2 million. And there's a huge thanks to some legislators that really went above and beyond to make sure that this happened. Senator Pete McGregor, Senator Winnie Brinks, and Senator Curtis Hertel from Lansing really championed this with the governor's office to the point where the governor actually had agreed to restore this before the budget agreement. And that was significant because she did not agree to anything else. But this program, she did agree to restoring that. In addition, there's $3.5 million for child care fund indirect costs. 14.8 for the county jail reimbursement program, which is over $1 million to our county. $4 million to the county veteran services, which is about $100,000 to Kent County. $27 million for payment in lieu of taxes, which was significant, especially to our partners in the rural counties. That was a huge hit to them. And for us, it's about $138,000. $13 million for secondary road patrol, which is about $350,000 to Kent County, and $13 million for the Department of Transportation for road and bridge repair, which is about $2.5 million to our county road commission. So those are some significant issues. Other issues that were restored is $38 million to tuition grants. That's for private universities. $8 million to rural OBGYN services, hospitals. $35 million to foundation allowance for Public Schools Academy. That was cuts to charter schools that has been restored. And $300,000 to some autism intervention programs. What is interesting that is not included in this program is that the legislature had included $370 million in road funding. That was not agreed upon, so that will not be included in this supplemental. There was also $100 million for the Governor's Reconnect program. If you remember, in her State of the State, she identified 2 programs. One was a retraining of individuals that need more training to get different jobs or better jobs, and then a second program that would allow, based on income, the opportunity to go to either community college or university. That was not included as well. And $37 million for Pure Michigan was also not funded, and it's my understanding that they only had money until the end of the year, so that is something that they're probably going to. Also part of the agreement are some other issues, budget-related, that are more statutory in nature. If you recall, the legislature, Republicans specifically, were very concerned that the governor used a rarely used state administrative board action item, which is the ability for a governor to move money within departments. And she used that in order to stabilize what she felt she needed to do in this budget. There are going to be some small changes to that. One is a boilerplate that indicates that she will not be able to use the state ed board for this current year budget. And then there will be some statutory language added that it has not been made public yet, but it looks as if it's going to be some parameters around notifying the legislature. So if a governor wants to use the state ed board, they must notify the legislature that he or she plans to do that, which will start a 30-day clock. So there's a 30-day cooling off period in which the governor will not be able to use the state ed board, giving the legislature that time to fix the problem if they want to. And then after that time period, the governor may move forward. So that will be moving as part of the process as well. There's also legislation that will require the legislature to complete the budget process by July 1st. There are no penalties for this provision, but it will be put in statutory requirement. And then finally, some guidelines around the Auditor General, allowing the Auditor General to have access to all confidential materials with regard to state government and within its purview. So that is something that both chambers wanted desperately, and that's something that they have agreed upon. So as I said, there are just 2 days left, and there are some other issues not budgetary related that the legislature does plan, or at least hope to take some action before they leave town. There's a gaming package that the House and Senate have been negotiating with the governor on probably for the last 9 months. This would allow in-state sports betting, internet gaming, making some reforms to our Charitable Gaming Act, as well as fantasy sports. We believe that they're very close to the agreement with the governor, and that's regarding the tax rate of these betting. So the Senate Regulatory Reform Committee will be moving those bills to the Senate floor with hopes that they can may have a final agreement within the next 24 or 48 hours. There's also legislation that might move off the House floor dealing with the Regional Transport Authority, and this is something that has been debated and discussed in Southeast Michigan for years. It appears that Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb have reached some type of an agreement, and this gives parameters for those 3 commissions to approve millages to put on the ballot, up to 5 millages, to put a regional busing system in place for those counties. That legislation may begin to move as well. There is legislation also on the Senate floor that may move, which would allow Kalamazoo County Board of Commissioners the option for a hotel tax. And the idea is that they want to add a 4% assessment on top of a 5% county tax for a new arena and events platform in downtown Kalamazoo. That may have a few hiccups that could delay it, but that is an intent to try to move that forward. There's also a legislation in the House to allow Supreme Court salary increases of 5% in 2021 and 2022. And this was based on a recommendation from the State Officers Compensation Commission. If this is approved, this will be the first increase for the Supreme Court justices in over 19 years. So they're certainly hopeful that that goes through. And then House and Ways is dealing with a package of bills that we're watching closely by Representative Jack O'Malley, which would allow local units of government to raise gas tax and registration fees, as opposed to relying on special tax hikes and millages and bonding. It's something that I think is seen as controversial, that Republicans may want to use this as an out for a tax increase, is just putting it on the local units of government. So we're watching that closely. It may come out of House Ways and Means, but then that's probably as far as it would go over the next 2 days. But we'll be watching that closely because that could have some impacts on local units of government and some decisions that they want to make. That is my report for right now. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Good, thank you. Commissioners, any questions? Yes, Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Steck. Becky, on the Regional Transit Authority that you mentioned, is part of that bill got the exemption where Henley is
But I'll find that out.
I take it the 4-year county commission terms.
Well, we do have some complicating factors for the 4-year commission bill. It is in House Ways and Means. There perhaps are some other things that the Democrats might want. So there might be a larger deal in place, but it certainly won't be able to happen before the end of the year. But we're going to continue to work with them to see if there's some way we can reach a compromise to get that moving. But right now, yes, there is a conflict between whether it's in a gubernatorial or presidential year.
So politics aside, Michigan is still one of 3 states that still have 2 years.
So for the moment, yes.
Okay, thank
Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair. I have a bunch of questions. I'll take a couple now if I could maybe finish up with a few more. Becky, I wanted to ask whether you know the Supreme Court salaries. If those do change, does that have a cascading effect on judge salaries further down the line? Will that affect our budget at some point?
I don't believe so, but let me confirm that it just refers to the Supreme Court justices.
Okay. Because I was thinking there's some way in which the judge salaries are based on some statewide salaries. So
Okay,
that'd
let me
be-
confirm that for you.
for our planning, good to know.
Absolutely.
Wanted to ask about your thoughts about the Pure Michigan thing, which is pretty significant. We partner with them a lot in our community. Any sense for whether that's dead, or I didn't quite get a sense whether you thought it might happen yet next year?
Yeah.
Some funding?
Absolutely. I do believe there will be funding for it. As I indicated, the whole process along, and I guess what we needed to back up, the whole idea of doing two supplementals was an idea that they would be able to reach an agreement before the Thanksgiving break. And what they were going to do is do those that they really needed to do before Thanksgiving and then come back and do the others, which should have been now. That's delayed. So I think what you'll see is probably restoration in mid-January. Clearly, this agreement that they've made opens the door for a restoration of a significant portion of what has been vetoed. So I would think that would be a priority first thing in January.
Maybe one more in this round?
Sure.
My understanding is that part of the supplemental includes some lead paint remediation funding. Do we have any sense whether some of that will be available to Kent County, or where that will go? Who has access to that?
So I would be happy to send you the complete list of restoration, and then I will check on that as far as how they plan to disperse that by county or region. Specifics weren't outlined in this legislation, but I'll get that for you, as well as by tomorrow. I'll make sure that I get to you a complete list of everything that has been voted on so that you can see the list of both the school aid as well as the other supplemental.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Well, when you're done.
Well, I did have one question, Becky. The veto also included a couple of employment support programs, and I don't think they were reinstated in the supplemental. Do you know the status of those?
Employment?
Yes.
I do not, but I will check on those.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Did you have one more, Commissioner Talon?
Maybe a couple. Thank you.
I think I asked if you had one more.
Okay. Well, let me ask this
ahead.
one. I'm not sure whether it's a Wayman or a Becky question, but there's $10 million that's supposed to be coming to health departments. And I don't think it's part of the supplemental, but do we know whether some of that will be coming here?
I think he's talking about the work that McGregor was doing in relation to the health department. I'm not sure what that number is that we're getting, but we can find out what that number
The
is.
health department increase?
Yeah.
That was not vetoed, so that should be flowing. I don't know the distribution, but I will check on that, but it was not a veto item. If you're talking about the local public health department increase.
No, there was, maybe Stan knows a little bit more.
They were talking about too, but that has been released, and the good thing about it was it wasn't part of the budget. That's why
Right.
it wasn't axed to the group.
Trying to remember
That money
what.
was supposed to be released this week.
And I'm wondering whether some of that
That
is
was
coming
kept.
to us. Yeah, it was related to something else, and I'm blanking on what it was, but wondered if we're aware of that and if some of it's coming here.
Yeah, I'm for sure it's coming here. We'll get you the number.
Okay.
I think that was held up even prior to this action. I think that was happening even
Part of the veto.
prior to the veto.
Right,
So they didn't-
right.
they
It
didn't
wasn't
stop.
related to the veto, I
Yeah.
know that, yeah. All right, I'll
get you
stop,
done.
thank you.
I've got the House bills on notes. I can talk to you later about it.
All right, thank you.
All right, good. Anything else? If not, thank you, Becky. Appreciate your report as always. Next item of business is a report performance measurements review with our prosecutor, Chris Becker. Welcome, good morning.
Open You got a packet of information because I dropped it off last week, so I didn't do a PowerPoint this year. Kind of done this presentation, actually, I've been going around to all the townships. Commissioner Hennessy saw me at a neighborhood meeting, so you've seen a lot of this, I think. So I apologize to you at least. But this is something I'm trying to get out to the community because this is essentially a lot of the new stuff we've been doing over the last few years and trying to get the message out on what the prosecutor's office is doing more than just prosecuting people and throwing them in prison. And so I kind of want to go through these and talk about our performance measurements along with them. The first one, if you will, is if you have that flyer, the juvenile sexting. It looks like this, and these presentations are good because it made me realize we need to order more of these. We have them in color, but we were kind of running low, so I just made copies of them. This is our oldest new program, if you will. We started this last year, and this is a thing that we recognized an issue where we had a lot of kids in middle school primarily, even in the early high school. It's kind of the you show me mine, I'll show you yours, except they do it over phones. And they send texts and pictures and so forth, and we had 40 kids in one middle school that we essentially couldn't do anything with. And it's not like we want to get them in the criminal justice system, but it felt like, oh, just leave it to the schools is not something that was a really good option. The schools are quite frankly asking for more. So what this is they can refer cases to us in terms of consensual kids showing photos, whatever it may be, and we put them through a 4-hour course. It's through Corrective Solutions, which we used to use for our check cases. We subsequently don't use them anymore because we don't have that many check cases, but we use them for this sexting program where they watch a video, they answer questions while in the video, so it's not like they can turn it on and leave the room, and if they successfully complete that course, we don't have any charges against them. Okay, and the course is nothing more than probably any school or any parents telling them to begin with, hey, what you put online, when you put out there in the internet, when you use these computers for, it's out there, it stays on there. But once again, for when it's coming from the prosecutor's office, maybe on law enforcement involved, it's a reinforcement, if you will, that you shouldn't be engaging in this sort of behavior and hopefully catch them early. So when they get to be older and they get to be adults, when there may be prison time, there may be jail time, there may be sex offender registration sanctions, they learn this type of behavior, that they shouldn't do this type of behavior. Up to this point, we've had about 52 referrals. Most of the time, we've only had 4 unsuccessful ones. So the kids are getting the message. It's been a very positive feedback by those who have gone through it. So I think it's an effective program that we can get kids and not involve them and teach them early versus later when they really get to be adults and get in the criminal justice system. The next one I want to talk about is the restorative justice. It's the blue flyer, if you will, that you have. This one's the actual flyer that we use. This was something we started, we were partnering up with. It's us, the juvenile court system, and the Dispute Resolution Center of West Michigan. This is purely for the juvenile, and you see there's a common theme with a lot of what we're doing here is trying to impact the kids because I think that's where we have the most benefit. It started out, this is a little bit out of date to some extent, we looked at basically 3 crimes: malicious destruction of property, assault and battery, and minor larceny offenses. We weren't getting the numbers, quite frankly. We weren't getting the numbers. This is just basically starting this year, and we've expanded it. So essentially what we do is a lot of these low-level offenses, when you're a juvenile, it goes right into deferment. You get deferred. You don't go through the formal criminal justice system. So we've designed this program for the kids who are coming through a second time. They haven't maybe got the message, or there haven't been any sanctions necessarily. And what restorative justice does is it pairs the defendant, the kid, and the victim. And they come together, and that's where the Dispute Resolution Center comes in. They facilitate it. It's not just you throw them in the room and have them talk it out. The facilitator meets with one party first, meets with the other party second. They kind of discuss things, and then they do meet together, and they can kind of come up with a solution. It's very unique in the criminal justice system because very often it's the judge just imposing a sentence. Where this is the 2 parties kind of coming together in agreement, if you will. I always use the very first case we had was out of Cedar Springs. Typical kid thing. Kids were shooting BB guns and shot up the side of a house, causing a bunch, $3,000 worth of damage to siding. Okay? Well, we got the victim to agree and the 2 kids, and he wanted them to take a gun safety class, mow his lawn 4 times, and then give a speech at his church about what they've learned. And so they did, and the juvenile probation essentially monitors that to make sure that as long as hey, they complied with the agreement, they did what they said. Once again, we drop it off the record. And what this does is, even as a juvenile record, we've talked about the school to prison pipeline. With a juvenile record, it gets you points. If you got a juvenile conviction, it'll get you points that goes on, if you get an adult conviction, that could increase your sentence, could you increase your possibility of going to prison. So by getting them off, A, it helps that, but B, I'm really hoping that once again, they learn the lesson. When they show these, kids that they're having an impact, how it impacts the victims' lives, maybe they'll think a second time. The numbers, it's been interesting. We've had, 41 juveniles referred. Only 12 have actually gotten through the process. Now, you look at it, if you see the numbers here, that's not that out of whack. I've talked with some people at Michigan State who do this, and they say, about 50%. And it's usually the victims. The victims don't want to do it. They think it's too kumbaya, group hug thing, nothing's going to happen. But the victims who do participate and go through it, really appreciate it. They think they have a voice. They think it has an impact. So it's just a matter of trying to get that message out, that get those victims involved. Clearly, it's the carrot for the defendants because they don't get something on the record. But it's convincing those victims that there is a benefit to them and maybe has a long-term impact that I think we got to work on. So we're about what the national average is. It just, I was expecting a little bit more. So I think it's something, it's the first year. We're really going to work on it and see how that goes. The next program, it's the Youthful Sex Offender Treatment Program. It's a little brochure. This is the brochure we have here. This is maybe a credit to bipartisanship. We just heard about Lansing, how things don't get done. I have to shout out to Representative LeGrand and former Representative Verheuwen. They got this program together, got us funding for it. And what this is, I don't know, I'm assuming you all are fairly familiar with ASOTP, Adolescent Sex Offender Treatment Program. We've had that for probably 30 years, and it's juveniles. You put them in a intense therapy in the juvenile system, and it shows about a 5% recidivism rate. It's been doing in Kent County for, like I said, 30 years. Well, essentially what we want to do, the idea, and we partnered, some defense attorneys, Men's Resource Center, and Burke Ice Counseling. We want to do that program, except for 17 to 24-year-olds. And it's the 17 to 24-year-olds, what we envision is, CSC third. If you're 18 and have sex with a 15-year-old, that's statutory rape. That's a mandatory prison sentence. 17 years old, right now is still an adult. Well, it could be completely consensual, and if you want to start building more jails and giving more staff, we want to fully prosecute all these cases in Kent County of teenagers having sex. That's an issue. What this does, though, is it gets them into the treatment. They're put on a delay of sentence. We work with the court, so it's much like a treatment court program. We're trying to copy the treatment court program in ASOTP. So Judge Denenfeld's the assigned judge. We have meetings once a month to talk about cases, who's appropriate, who's not. And then on the delay of sentence, they go through the treatment. There are weekly individual sessions, group sessions, and then as they successfully complete the treatment, we would plead them to a felony. We would plead them to an offense, just not a registrable offense. We're using seduction right now. Seduction is still debauching an unmarried woman. That is still an offense in the books, and it's a non-registrable offense. It's a 5-year felony. So they can plead to it. They get Holmes Youthful Trainee Act, so they're getting, it's not like they're getting away with it. They're not getting anything. They're getting a conviction. They're on probation. They got to go through treatment. But you're hopefully saving them from, once again, the long-term impacts of 17 years old being a sex offender and for consensual sex. They just had a interesting thing related to that. People, they're actually in Mexico. They're living here. It was 20 years ago. He was convicted of CSC third with his wife. He was 17, she was 15. They got married. They have 3 kids. And he wants to come back in the country, but he can't because he's a sex offender because he had sex with his wife 20 years ago. Stuff like that. So this is not for the, if there's any sort of force, any sort of coercion, any sort of, something like that. And the biggest thing is the victims have to approve. The victims have to absolutely give a green light to do this. So it's not just us, the victims, and so often victims say, we just want them to get help. We want them to, change behavior. So we've had 30 cases go through. I've screened out 3. I'm the gatekeeper, so there's 3 I've said, no, I don't think they're appropriate. We've had 4 fail out. We've had 4 successful completions, and then we've got a bunch of kids still in the program right now. We hope to keep it going. We're, with the whole Lansing thing, we've got threats to our funding too. So we'll see how that goes. But this is a pilot program. It's the only one in the state we're doing anything like this. Nobody else is doing it, so we're hopeful that it's going to maybe have some impact that we can even go statewide. The next one is the brochure like that, our therapy dog. This is our warm fuzzy program, group hugs and everything like that. This is something I got to give a shout out to Judge Feeney. A lot of the smaller prosecutors' offices have therapy dogs. Okay, and this is a tremendous benefit to kids and vulnerable adults. Coming to court is, scary. It's scary for adults, much less kids, who have to now talk most of the time about sexual offenses committed on them by someone they love. Okay, their grandfather, their stepdad, mom's boyfriend, whatever it is, and that's the vast majority of it. So a lot of the smaller offices have one courthouse, they have one dog, and they can handle that. Well, I don't have that. I don't have that luxury. We have the Kent County Courthouse down here with how many different courtrooms, 63rd, 59th, 62nd. Well, I'm going to tell a victim, here that, well, we'll have a therapy dog for you, but if you're in Granville, you can't have one because we only got one dog. Well, what we've done, partner with West Michigan Therapy Dogs, we have dogs on call now, okay? Essentially, that's what it is, and it's been a huge success. We've only started this in June. We've had about 40 cases go through right now, and I've seen the impact where I had a girl that her grandfather had molested her, would not talk. I take him over to the court early, just a empty courtroom, put him on the stand, ask him, what's your favorite ice cream? How do you like, what's your favorite football team? Whatever it may be, and she would not talk, would not say a word, and they said, well, let's have the dog up there with you. Started petting the dog, and next thing you know, she's answering those questions. So, it opens them up, and just to have them sit there, I've gone on the victim witness, and we've had, 2 dogs, because we had 2 separate victims on the same case, and we're using it for family court too. They're playing Yahtzee with the 2 dogs. They're petting the dogs and stuff like that. So I think it's been a tremendous success story. We have every single court in the county. We give them a couple days notice, and they'll have a dog there in district court, circuit court, family court. And it gives us the benefit of having that, but we don't have to care for the dog, vet bills, take the dog out for bathroom breaks during the middle of the day. So it's been a real success program, and I'm really happy how well it's proceeded. The last one I want to talk about is the KEEP program. This is our family division in terms of we have a division that establishes paternity and sets up child support payments. We work with friend of the court. Well, the whole thing with the friend of the court, we had that issue come up where, deputies are going out arrested. We try to do something more proactive. And what this does, it allows mothers we're working with the health department, have the public health nurses to go out early before the baby's born and identify, hey, I think this is the dad, and start that process before the baby's born. Right now, traditionally, it's the baby's born, then you try to establish paternity. We've been very good. I think most of the time we're within 60 to 90 days establishing paternity. But even then, 60 to 90 days is A, the dad's not getting visitation necessarily if there's an issue, and B, that paternity order is building up. It's not like when you get named dad, they look back and say, okay, you've been dad since the birth, you need to pay even though you didn't know. And so we can do this almost immediately and get visitation set up, get the payment set up so he doesn't get into arrears and get into those issues that cause him to get arrested. And so that was the idea. I actually had to trade Andy Thalheimer a phone number and a phone number to be named later because he had the 632 KEEP that we wanted, so I traded him phone numbers. So it was a good partnership. But right now, we've only had about a dozen cases, only 1 have gone through. And I think part of that, we've heard horror stories in Genesee County where they did something like this because they were almost a year, 2 years. We don't have that issue. We're very good in terms of getting things set up right away. So we've only had about a dozen cases go through it. So it's something I'm going to keep an eye on in terms of how effective is and do we need it to, moving forward. But it is. It's something that's, I think, forward-looking and trying to address a problem that could come up. The last one, I hope you have a picture. I don't have it, but it's a Jared Chance, a headline. Jared Chance found guilty of murder. With all this, kind of warm and fuzzy alternative stuff, we aren't neglecting our main duty, I think, and that's protecting the citizens of Kent County. Jared Chance was the decapitation case that we had. Went to trial, Lawrence Boisvert. One of my assistants tried it successfully, a very difficult circumstantial case. But I bring this up in terms of the issues that I'm looking forward at. We use investigative subpoenas. And the vast majority of cases we do right now use investigative subpoenas on the serious homicides. Why is that? People don't want to cooperate. People don't come forward. And so it puts a tremendous strain on us, puts a tremendous strain on the sheriff's office because it's a process where we got to petition the court to get subpoenas. We got to drop the subpoenas. We got to have the police officer serve the subpoenas, and then we got to bring them into court and have them testify. We testify under oath. So it's another, it's on top of the normal court proceedings that we do, the sentences, the trials, and everything else, the PCCs that we've got to do to investigate these cases. It isn't like the old days, people talk to the police. They come in and say, we saw so-and-so do this. It's a different world out there, and I think that's going to be the biggest challenge we have moving forward, that and indigent defense, just because of the manpower resources we need. Indigent defense is another issue where a lot of prosecutors' offices right now are, the attorneys are at arraignments, and prosecutors' offices across the state are saying, well, if they're there, we need to be there. I haven't made that determination yet. I think we have a very strong court services program that gives the judges good information. But stuff like that, and I think we're going to see, we had a lot of pleas at the arraignment stage. We're getting less of those, so that's going to increase the work in terms of pretrial conferences, motions, so on and so forth. We've already seen that. Wyoming usually has about maybe 2 jury trials a year. Well, last time they picked 5 jury trials, which they're beside themselves, kind of, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? But that impacts us. 5 jury trials is more witnesses, more witness fees, more time in court. So looking forward in terms of, whether it be the investigative subpoena process or the indigent defense and how that's going to affect how we handle our cases, it's going to put strain on our resources and how I assign cases, how we deal with cases. So that's kind of my short summary of what we're doing, some of the unique programs and some of the things I see. Obviously, any questions?
Thank you, Chris, for your report. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Ponstein, I think you were first again.
I can let Jim go.
All right, I'll take that as a point of order. Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Prosecutor Becker, for your great work, and I appreciated, you're spending a lot of time talking about changing behavior with alternative programs. I think that's really important, and in that context, I wanted to just call attention to page 3 of the performance measures. The number of misdemeanor warrants authorized is expected to be around almost 6,000 this year. And in the context also of what I've been learning as part of the Governor's Jails Task Force around the state and nationally, a lot of those misdemeanor warrants are for non-safety related kinds of offenses. Wondering whether you have a sense for whether that's the case here. How many of those, what percentage of those, and perhaps a little reflection on how that affects your
Sure.
work, the work of the sheriff.
Yeah, in terms of we've taken steps already. We're maybe once again ahead of the game in terms of the rest of the state, because I know we've seen some of the reports in Pam from that, and a lot of that's focused on suspended license. And before Bill started this 10 years ago, we started telling departments, don't do warrants for suspended licenses. Write a ticket. It's not worth the time in the paper because we weren't sending people to jail. They're getting arrested, lodged for a couple days, whatever, until they get arraigned and due out. So we were doing stuff like that. Same with marijuana. I know marijuana pops up quite a bit in the Pew Task Force statements. We had said, don't bring down misdemeanor use of marijuana warrants. And now it's legal, so that's not an issue. So we've been trying to do stuff like that. So our numbers, I think, are, we've taken out a lot of the suspended license marijuana stuff. If you look at it, I think our biggest thing is probably retail fraud is huge. Now, is that a safety offense or not? That's, it's a theft offense, but if you talk to Wyoming, I sent them some stuff. The Walmart, I think I heard the Walmart out there is the #1 Walmart in the country for retail fraud thefts. And so it's a huge problem for Wyoming because they're getting called out there, but what are you supposed to do? I've seen people with, 8, 9 retail frauds. We had one lady, I maybe even shared, that had probably a dozen retail frauds across the county in a month and a half. So it is a balance. We're trying to, what do you deal with them? Okay, you write a ticket that, lets them go out. So, we are cognizant and we're working on it. We've taken steps and we're always willing to take a look at more that we can do.
Sounds like we're probably a bit ahead of the game
I
here.
think we are. I mean, that's usually what we find in these meetings. Like I said, our court services, a lot of judges across the state have it's just they pull a number out of the hat. Okay, we're going to oppose a, $5,000 bond, or we have a court services program where it gives them their criminal history, recommendations, substance abuse, and really, gives them something to base that on. And we're much further ahead in the state than the rest of everybody else.
Thank you.
Now, Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Jim. Steph. So, thanks for being here. Inhalants, is it first of all, is it illegal to use, and is it a problem in our county? And if it's not illegal, what are parents supposed to do?
Well, we've now changed the vaping. We just, I think Chuck is heading out there. We're starting, it just was a recent law change with the whole vaping and stuff. Inhalants have always been like the whippets and stuff like that have been illegal. I can't say that's been a huge part of our case log, but the vaping stuff in terms of minors just was made illegal, and it is a huge problem. I got 2 kids in high school and middle school, and they say you go in the bathroom and kids are vaping and doing all that stuff. So it is an issue, and we're working. I had a meeting with the health department in terms of part of the new vaping law is to get them health education. It's not just, criminalizing it and putting them in jail or putting them in juvenile detention. It's trying to teach them to change their behaviors. And I think we're working with Cherry Street Health to get that education aspect as part of enforcing the vaping and blah like that.
Well, you had mentioned earlier about the sexting. How do you, as a prosecutor, find out that it's occurring? Supposedly over the phone.
Commissioner Ponstein, can you turn your mic on?
I heard it. In terms of this, the sexting, we usually, it gets out, whether it be, when you share it with 40 kids, eventually somebody, messes up and their parents find out, something like that. A lot of times, the other time we get it is very often, I say it's the boys. The boys, they do something and they tape it, and then the girl breaks up with them because when they do it, it's consensual, and then they share it with their friends, and then the girl finds out, and then her parents call. So it's, through stuff like that, the normal teenage, they're still kids and they still talk and parents find out. And we usually get through the parents.
Yes, Commissioner Hennessy.
I do appreciate that you are very visible in the neighborhoods, attending and having your staff work at the national night outs and having tables set up. And again, I did hear you talk to a neighborhood group in October. And it was very nice and very informative then, and it was interesting to see how well you were received and known by the people who were in the room.
I thank you. And that is something we're trying to change, because I think it is, we have to be as open as, we're part of law enforcement. They're, to some extent, taking a hit in terms of reputation, what we're doing. And I think the common perception is, the only role of the prosecutor is to throw people in prison. And that's what we do. And I don't think anybody in our staff, that's not what we sign up for. We want to make our community better, and there's a variety of different ways. Some people richly deserve to go to prison. Mr. Chance, who decapitates a person, they should go to prison. But there's a lot of people, and there's other ways we can work to hopefully maybe prevent that and keep them productive members of society.
Chris, just a couple of questions I had. One is the crime that we probably hear the most about is homicide, and this past year we've had a significant increase in the number of homicides, and from my observation they still appear to be predominantly between individuals that know each other. What's your sense of whether we have a trend here, or whether this is just a unique experience in 2019?
Yeah, I think it's unique to some extent, because there's no commonalities. There's been a ton of shootings, and there's some commonalities along those, and we're working in terms of with Grand Rapids Police to deal with them, especially in the city. But the other ones are just all over the board. Last year, we had a number of domestics, and, the first 5, I think, right off the bat were domestic offenses. And so I'm still trying to work on getting a domestic violence court to attack that, and I've done stuff like that. And so last year, I'm like, oh, there's some domestics. This year, yeah, it's all over the board. People know each other, but, we had, 3 stabbings last week, which, stabbings are not usually, it's usually the gun violence. So to say there's some sort of trend right now, I haven't seen it.
Okay. The second question I had is, you said something earlier with respect to HIDA. I was thinking that clearly not my area, but that HIDA, there is no record after completion of a HIDA
Correct. It
requirement?
drops off you got to plead guilty, and as long as you successfully complete probation, it drops off your record. Goes an arrest, but not a conviction.
So there's nothing there that carries on in a subsequent point system for future activity?
Correct.
Okay.
And to the sex offender registry, though, the unique thing is, you can get HIDA under some of the sex offenses, but you're still on the registry. So you'd have no conviction, but you got to register as a sex offender for something that you weren't technically convicted for. So that's why we find this, the YSOTP, we wanted to try and do something that if you're qualifying for homes, why are you stuck with this for the next 25 years because, on a conviction that's not even on your record.
And HIDA was elevated to age 25, you can now use it?
24.
24.
Yeah, 21 through 24 with the consent of the prosecutor's office. So there's a 3, it used to be 21, but then they said, if we, agree, we can give up.
Okay. Then the last thing, just again to acknowledge you and your department for the innovation that you've expressed and exercised through the course of this, and bringing a new approach to how we deal with these problems in our community. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next item of business is Board of Commissioners appointments to various boards, commissions, and committees for year 2020.
Yeah, this is a request to the board to recommend various appointments to boards, commissions, and committees for 2020. The Board of Commissioners, on an annual basis, appoints county residents and commissions to boards, commissions, and committees in accordance with applicable state statutes for standing rules. Interest in serving on various boards, commissions, and committees was solicited via www.accesskent.com. Over 130 applications were received for 45 vacancies. 3 interview teams consisting of Commissioners Steck, Kalman, and Skaggs, Commissioners Ponstein, Melton, and Talon, Commissioners Vonk, Hennessy, and Soffeld reviewed all applications and conducted interviews for the various vacancies. The recommended nominees to fill vacancies noted on the appointed boards, commissions, and committees listing.
You're not going to read them all?
No,
Okay,
there's a lot.
yes, there are.
There's a lot.
Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move it.
Moved to
Support.
approved and supported. Any comments or questions? I would note, as you look through this, there are 3 of these that are identified with the TBD, to be determined, and those are positions for which we did not have qualified candidates. And by qualified, I mean most of these have certain profiles and circumstances that the candidates must meet, such as a non-custodial parent for the FOC Citizens Advisory Committee. So we did not have candidates to fill that, so we'll continue to work on that. So there's 3 of those yet that are still unresolved. Any other questions or comments? If not, all those in favor.
Did you take a motion?
There was, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, there was a motion.
Yes.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is approved. All right, next item of business, number 6, Human Resources, pay grade amendments for various UAW positions.
Yes, this is a request to the board to approve pay grade amendments for the following United Auto Workers positions: clinic assistant, landfill utility worker, laundry service coordinator, and a property clerk, veteran services representative, and customer services representative. In accordance with a contractual commitment with the UAW, the county conducted a wage study of UAW classifications in 2019. The result of the study and subsequent negotiations with UAW is that the following 6 UAW classifications are being recommended for increases. And you'll see these positions listed for the clinic assistant, landfill utility worker, laundry service coordinator, property clerk, veteran services representative, and customer services. You'll see the proposed new pay grades being recommended. The estimated cost to make these changes is $48,200, which will be absorbed in the current 2020 budget with no additional appropriations needed.
Is there a motion? It is moved and supported. Did I hear support? Yes. Questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. So I see the different classifications and what the new pay grade is, but some of the classifications don't appear to have any financial impact. Is that just because the positions aren't currently filled?
Amy Ralston, if you'll.
Hi, good morning. The positions where there's no apparent financial impact is as a result of the fact that that position is part of a dual-tier wage schedule. So all of the incumbents in the position would be in the higher tier reserved for people who are hired before a certain date. So they're actually paid either the same or more than what we're proposing.
Yes, Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, Amy. Could you just refresh us with a brief summary of what this wage review looks like? What does that process involve?
Sure. We hired a consultant, and they helped us to conduct a market study for UAW positions. And then we looked internally within HR at internal equity. We have a tool that we use to basically assign a point value to various positions and determine the value of one versus another internally. We also talked with departments and gathered their input as it pertains to our ability to effectively recruit and retain people in the positions that were identified in this study. We talked with administration and fiscal services to determine the ability to fund any proposed changes, and we were, of course, obligated to bargain this with the UAW.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, motion's made and supported. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It is approved. All right, next item is miscellaneous. Does anyone have any miscellaneous? Commissioner Ponstein, once again, first out of the box.
So I think what Commissioner Talon was talking about, it was the local community stabilization authority. By November 30th, they're supposed to release 10 million. That was finally released on the 2nd. Our share of it would have been 449,000. And the health departments should have already gotten that.
Thank you. Commissioner Melton.
Thank you, Chair, and I may bring it up at our next meeting too, but I'm guessing that most everyone has heard about the little boy that went through the adoption process and brought his entire classroom with him. I have 5 sister-in-laws all over the country, and my sister lives in another part of the country too. So they all have commented, because they all started here, how exciting that was. But the one thing that most of them noticed, and this is what I wanted to comment on, was how cool our Judge Gardner looked for this adoption period. I mean, she had little whatever's in her ears and little festive bows all over, and it just really gave everyone a total different feel for what a courtroom can be like under a circumstance like that. And I think that Patty Gardner really did Kent County proud. I felt pretty cool about it.
I will say she's never worn that when I appeared in front of her.
Anyway.
Yeah, there's more to that story. We've received calls from national news. They want to come in, or they want to have the young fella come to their studio. So, more to come.
Well, and it's just very, we don't hear enough of those. And for them to comment, not just on the fact that, boy, that's from my hometown, but look at what your judge did, where, for her garb, if you will, or her wardrobe, to make or help these kids feel even that much more special that day. Kudos to Patty Gardner.
Yep, it's a great story. Yes, Commissioner Talon.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully everyone heard about a couple of federal bills that have been introduced related to the Medicaid exclusion issue that affects our jails and our budgets. And I'm wondering whether that's something that our federal lobbyist is dealing with. We've been invited by MAC to advocate as individual commissioners with our elected officials, but it seems like as a commission, as a county, we ought to be pushing for that as well. So just wanted to raise that issue. Hopefully we can follow up.
Steve, you bet.
Yep, thank you.
Yep. Anyone else? Maybe just as a report in response to that, Commissioner Talon, a number of us did meet with our federal lobbyist this past week just to touch base with them, get up to speed with the things that he's doing on our behalf. And so we're still looking forward to scheduling him for a report sometime in the next few months or this coming year. So the only other thing I have is, again, just to thank this committee for all your work on the appointment process. Every one of you served on one of these committees and engaged in the process of interviewing and selecting and recommending, so appreciate your hard work. And we're almost over the finish line, just a few more to get done, but good job. Thank you all. With that, we are adjourned.